The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Buckingham Palace as Catherine, Princess of Wales, walked through the East Wing corridors. She had always found these early hours peaceful, before the palace filled with staff and the day's official duties began. Today felt different somehow, as if the very walls were holding secrets that demanded to be discovered. Catherine had been living in the palace for over a decade now, yet there were still areas that remained mysterious to her. The East Wing, in particular, held rooms that seemed frozen in time, filled with portraits of long-dead royals and furniture covered in white sheets. It was during one of her morning walks that she first noticed the inconsistency. The corridor on the third floor appeared shorter from the inside than it looked from the outside. Catherine had a keen eye for architectural details, something she had developed during her art history studies at university. Standing at the large window at the end of the hallway, she could see that the building extended further than the corridor suggested. There was space unaccounted for, hidden behind what appeared to be a solid wall. Her curiosity sparked. Catherine began to examine the wall more closely. The wallpaper was older here, a deep burgundy with golden fleur-de-lis that looked like it hadn't been changed in decades. Running her fingers along the surface, she felt for any irregularities. The wall felt solid enough, but there was something about the pattern that seemed off. One section of the wallpaper didn't quite align with the rest. Catherine pressed gently against the misaligned section and felt it give slightly. Her heart began to race as she realized this might be more than just old wallpaper coming loose. She pressed harder, and to her amazement, a small section of the wall pivoted inward, revealing a narrow gap behind it. The discovery thrilled and frightened her in equal measure. Catherine knew the palace held many secrets, but finding a hidden passage felt like something out of a mystery novel. She hesitated for a moment, wondering if she should tell someone about her discovery or explore it herself. Her natural curiosity won out, and she carefully pushed the hidden panel further open. Behind the false wall was a narrow passage, barely wide enough for one person. The air that escaped was stale and carried a faint scent of lavender and old books. Catherine used her phone's flashlight to peer into the darkness ahead. The passage appeared to extend about 20 feet before opening into what looked like a larger space. Catherine squeezed through the opening and made her way carefully down the passage. The walls were plain stone, much older than the decorated corridors of the main palace. This felt like part of the original structure, perhaps dating back centuries. Her footsteps echoed softly in the confined space as she moved toward the light at the end. Emerging from the passage, Catherine found herself in a circular chamber that took her breath away. The room was larger than she had expected, with high, vaulted ceilings and tall, narrow windows that had been bricked up from the outside. Sunlight filtered through small gaps in the mortar, creating dancing patterns on the floor. But it wasn't the architecture that shocked Catherine the most. The chamber was clearly being used as someone's private retreat. There were fresh flowers, in vases, comfortable chairs arranged around a small table, and books that looked recently read scattered about. A small refrigerator hummed quietly in one corner, and there were paintings on easels that appeared to be works in progress. Catherine moved closer to examine the paintings and felt her stomach drop. The canvases showed scenes that were clearly meant to be private moments painted with an intimate knowledge that could only come from someone who had been present. There were images of family gatherings, private conversations, and moments that Catherine herself remembered experiencing, but from perspectives that suggested the artist had been watching unseen. One painting in particular made Catherine's blood run cold. It showed her and William in their private sitting room at Kensington Palace, a scene from just a few weeks ago when they had been discussing their children's education. The level of detail was extraordinary, down to the specific clothes they had been wearing and the exact arrangement of items on the coffee table. Catherine's hands trembled as she examined more of the artwork. Each piece revealed an intimate knowledge of the royal family's private lives that went far beyond what any outsider should possess. There were sketches of the children playing in gardens that were supposed to be private, images of quiet family dinners, and even drawings of conversations that had taken place behind closed doors. In the center of the room sat an ornate desk covered with papers and journals. Catherine approached it cautiously, her heart pounding as she realized she was about to uncover whoever had been creating this secret surveillance gallery. The journals were bound in expensive leather, and the handwriting inside was elegant and familiar. As Catherine opened the first journal and began to read, she felt the world shift beneath her feet. The handwriting belonged to Camilla, the queen consort. The entries detailed observations about family members, notes about their habits and routines, and plans for what appeared to be some kind of long-term project involving the monitoring of the entire royal family. The entries went back years, long before Camilla had officially joined the family. There were detailed notes about Catherine herself, observations about her relationship with William, and assessments of her suitability for royal life that felt deeply invasive and personal. Camilla had been watching, recording, and analyzing every member of the family with the dedication of a professional spy. Catherine sank into one of the chairs, overwhelmed by the implications of what she had discovered. This wasn't just a hobby or casual interest. The level of detail, the systematic approach, and the hidden location all suggested something far more serious. Camilla had been conducting surveillance on the royal family for years, and Catherine had stumbled upon what appeared to be her command center. The morning sun continued to stream through the gaps in the bricked-up windows, but Catherine felt cold despite the warmth. She knew that this discovery would change everything, not just for her, but for the entire royal family. The question was what to do with this devastating knowledge, and whether she was prepared for the consequences of exposing Camilla's secret chamber. Catherine sat frozen in the ornate chair, her mind racing as she tried to process the magnitude of her discovery. The journals in her hands contained years of surveillance notes, but as she continued reading, she realized the scope was even more extensive than she had initially thought. Camilla hadn't just been observing the family casually. She had been building detailed psychological profiles of each member. The journal entry dated from 3 years ago particularly caught Catherine's attention. It detailed a private conversation between Catherine and William about their concerns regarding Harry's relationship with Meghan. The notes were so precise that Camilla had recorded not just what was said, but the emotional undertones, body language, and what she interpreted as the underlying motivations behind their words. Catherine flipped through more pages, each one revealing deeper layers of invasion. There were entries about the children's personalities, their fears, their favorite activities, and even their private jokes with their parents. Camilla had somehow gained access to information that should have been impossible for her to obtain, especially during the years before she officially married into the family. Rising from the chair, Catherine began to explore the chamber more systematically. Along one wall, she discovered a series of filing cabinets, each drawer labeled with a family member's name. With trembling hands, she opened the drawer marked with her own name and gasped at what she found inside. The file was thick with photographs, documents, and printed emails. Some of the photos appeared to have been taken with a telephoto lens during what Catherine had believed were private family moments. There were images of her gardening at Kensington Palace, playing with the children in their private garden, and even photos taken through windows of her having breakfast with William. But the printed emails were what truly shocked Catherine. These were copies of personal correspondence between her and her sister Pippa, messages she had sent to her mother about the challenges of royal life, and even texts between her and William discussing family matters. Somehow Camilla had gained access to her private communications. Catherine's hands shook as she opened William's file next. It contained similar surveillance materials, but also something more disturbing. There were detailed analyses of his relationships with various family members, including notes about his tensions with his father and his complicated feelings about Camilla's role in the family. The observations were cold and clinical, written as if William were a subject being studied rather than a family member. The file on King Charles contained the most extensive documentation. Catherine realized that Camilla had been documenting Charles's habits, preferences, health concerns, and emotional states long before their marriage. There were notes about his dietary restrictions, his sleep patterns, his work schedule, and his relationships with his sons. It read like the work of someone preparing for a hostile takeover rather than someone planning to join a family. Catherine, discovered a separate section dedicated to what Camilla called strategic insights. These pages outlined detailed plans for how to position herself within the family hierarchy, how to gradually increase her influence, and how to manage potential opposition to her growing role. The calculations were ruthless and methodical. One particular entry from 5 years ago sent chills down Catherine's spine. It detailed a plan to neutralize potential threats to long-term positioning within the family structure. The entry specifically mentioned both Catherine and William as individuals who needed to be carefully managed to ensure they didn't interfere with Camilla's objectives. Catherine found evidence that Camilla had been manipulating family situations for years. There were notes about conversations she had influenced, family gatherings she had subtly controlled, and even decisions she had swayed through careful application of the information she had gathered. The woman had been playing a complex game of chess with the entire royal family as her pieces. The most disturbing discovery came when Catherine found a locked drawer in the desk. Using a letter opener from the desktop, she managed to force it open and found a collection of audio recording devices, small cameras, and what appeared to be transcripts of recorded conversations. Camilla hadn't just been observing, she had been actively surveilling the family with sophisticated equipment. The transcripts revealed conversations that Catherine remembered having in supposedly secure locations. Private discussions with William about their children's futures, conversations with palace staff about security concerns, and even intimate moments between her and William that should have been completely private. Camilla had somehow planted recording devices throughout the palace and possibly in their private residences as well. Catherine's phone buzzed with a text message from William asking where she was, and she realized she had been in the hidden chamber for over 2 hours. The morning was advancing, and soon the palace would be busy with staff and official activities. She needed to decide quickly what to do with this information. As she prepared to leave, Catherine noticed a calendar on the desk marked with upcoming family events. Each event had detailed notes about opportunities for information gathering and strategic positioning. Camilla was planning to continue her surveillance activities, and some of the upcoming events included private family gatherings that Catherine had been looking forward to. Catherine carefully photographed several key pages from the journals and files, ensuring she had evidence of what she had discovered. She knew that without proof, her claims about Camilla's activities would be dismissed as impossible or even delusional. The royal family had always prided itself on loyalty and discretion, and accusing the queen consort of systematic surveillance would require undeniable evidence. Before leaving the chamber, Catherine made sure everything was exactly as she had found it. She couldn't risk Camilla discovering that her secret had been exposed before Catherine had a chance to decide how to handle the situation. The implications were staggering, not just for the family, but for the monarchy itself. Catherine squeezed back through the narrow passage and carefully closed the hidden panel behind her. Standing in the corridor again, surrounded by the normal sights and sounds of palace life, she almost wondered if what she had discovered could have been real. The chamber felt like something from a spy thriller, not something that could exist within the walls of Buckingham Palace. But the photos on her phone confirmed that it had all been real. Camilla, the woman who had married into their family and gained their trust, had been conducting systematic surveillance on all of them for years. She had been collecting their secrets, analyzing their weaknesses, and positioning herself to manipulate family dynamics from the shadows. Catherine walked slowly back toward the main areas of the palace, her mind spinning with questions and concerns. How long had this been going on? How much did Charles know? Were there other family members who were aware of Camilla's activities? And most importantly, what was Camilla planning to do with all the information she had gathered? The discovery had shattered Catherine's understanding of her place in the royal family. Every interaction with Camilla over the years took on a new and sinister meaning. Every family dinner, every private conversation, every moment of vulnerability had potentially been catalogued and analyzed for future use. The sense of betrayal was overwhelming, but Catherine knew she had to remain calm and think strategically about her next moves. Catherine spent the rest of the morning in a daze, going through the motions of her normal routine while her mind remained consumed by what she had discovered. During a scheduled meeting with her private secretary about upcoming engagements, She found herself studying every person who entered the room, wondering if they might be part of Camilla's surveillance network. The thought that Camilla had somehow gained access to her private communications meant that there had to be accomplices. Someone with technical expertise had helped install the recording equipment. Someone with security clearance had provided access to restricted areas, and someone with administrative privileges had intercepted her emails and messages. The scope of the operation suggested a level of organization that went far beyond what one person could manage alone. Catherine decided she needed to conduct her own investigation before confronting anyone about what she had found. She began by carefully examining her private spaces at Kensington Palace, looking for any signs of surveillance equipment. In her study, she discovered a small device hidden behind a picture frame that looked suspiciously like a listening device. Her heart sank as she realized that her most private conversations with William and the children had likely been recorded. Using her phone to search for information about surveillance equipment, Catherine learned enough to identify several other potential devices throughout their private quarters. The placement was strategic, positioned to capture conversations in areas where the family spent the most intimate time together. Someone had studied their habits carefully before installing the equipment. Catherine knew she needed help, but she wasn't sure who she could trust. If Camilla had been conducting this surveillance for years, she had likely built relationships with key palace staff members. Catherine decided to reach out to her own security detail, people who had been with her since before her marriage and whose loyalty she felt confident about. Detective Inspector Sarah Mitchell had been part of Catherine's protection team for over 8 years. She was professional, discreet, and had always demonstrated genuine concern for Catherine's well-being beyond just her physical security. Catherine arranged to meet with her privately under the pretense of discussing security arrangements for an upcoming charity event. When they met in Catherine's private office at Kensington Palace, Catherine carefully swept the room for listening devices before beginning the conversation. She showed Detective Inspector Mitchell the photos she had taken in Camilla's hidden chamber and explained what she had discovered. The detective's expression grew increasingly grim as Catherine detailed the extent of the surveillance operation. Detective Inspector Mitchell confirmed Catherine's suspicions that this level of surveillance would require multiple accomplices and significant resources. She also pointed out that some of the activities Catherine had documented would likely constitute criminal offenses under British privacy laws, regardless of the perpetrator's position within the royal family. Together, they developed a plan to gather more evidence while protecting Catherine from potential retaliation. Detective Inspector Mitchell would discreetly investigate the technical aspects of the surveillance operation, using her law enforcement contacts to trace the equipment and identify possible suppliers. Catherine would continue to document her findings while being careful not to alert Camilla to her discovery. The next few days were tense as Catherine tried to maintain normal interactions with Camilla during family events. At a small dinner gathering at Clarence's house, Catherine found herself studying Camilla's behavior with new eyes. The older woman seemed to be watching everyone carefully, asking seemingly innocent questions that Catherine now realized were designed to gather information. During the dinner, Camilla made several comments about family members' activities that seemed to demonstrate knowledge she shouldn't have had. She mentioned details about Harry and Meghan's recent phone calls, referenced conversations between William and his father that were supposed to have been private, and made observations about the children's school activities that hadn't been shared publicly. Catherine excused herself during dessert and slipped away to the bathroom, where she used her phone to record voice notes about Camilla's suspicious comments. She was beginning to build a pattern of evidence that showed Camilla was using information she could only have obtained through surveillance. Later that evening, William noticed that Catherine seemed distracted and asked if something was bothering her. Catherine desperately wanted to share what she had discovered, but she knew that William's relationship with his stepmother was already complicated, and she didn't want to burden him with these revelations until she had more concrete evidence. Catherine told William that she had been feeling stressed about some upcoming engagements and needed some time to think things through. William was understanding and supportive, but Catherine felt guilty about not being completely honest with him. The secret was creating a barrier between them that felt uncomfortable and wrong. The following day, Detective Inspector Mitchell reported back with disturbing news. Her investigation had revealed that some of the surveillance equipment Catherine had found was military-grade technology that wasn't available to civilian consumers. This suggested that Camilla had connections to intelligence services or had somehow gained access to government resources for her surveillance operation. More concerning was the discovery that several palace staff members had been making regular payments to an offshore account that couldn't be traced. The timing of these payments corresponded with major family events and private gatherings, suggesting they were being compensated for providing information or access to restricted areas. Catherine realized that the royal family's entire support system had been compromised. Staff members they trusted with their most private moments had been secretly working for Camilla, feeding her information about their daily lives, their conversations, and their personal struggles. The betrayal felt complete and devastating. Detective Inspector Mitchell also discovered that Camilla had been using her position to access official royal correspondence, including communications between family members and government officials. This meant that sensitive political discussions, security briefings, and diplomatic correspondence had all been monitored and documented. The implications for national security were staggering. If Camilla had been recording conversations involving government ministers, foreign diplomats, or security officials, she potentially possessed information that could be used to blackmail or manipulate powerful people beyond the royal family. Catherine began to understand that what she had stumbled upon wasn't just a family scandal, it was a potential threat to the stability of the monarchy itself. Camilla had positioned herself to have leverage over virtually everyone in the royal family and many people in the government. The woman had essentially created a private intelligence operation within the heart of the British establishment. As Catherine processed these revelations, she realized that her own position was becoming increasingly dangerous. If Camilla discovered that her activities had been exposed, there was no telling how she might respond. The woman had already demonstrated her willingness to violate privacy, manipulate family relationships, and potentially break laws to achieve her objectives. Catherine made the difficult decision to begin wearing a small recording device provided by Detective Inspector Mitchell. If Camilla confronted her or made any threats, Catherine wanted to have evidence of those interactions. She also began varying her daily routines and avoiding predictable patterns that might make her vulnerable to surveillance or intimidation. The weight of carrying this secret was beginning to affect Catherine's health and well-being. She found herself losing sleep, feeling constantly anxious and struggling to maintain normal interactions with family members. The knowledge that every family gathering, every private moment, and every conversation had potentially been monitored made her feel violated and vulnerable. Catherine knew that she would soon have to make a decision about how to proceed with what she had learned. The evidence was mounting, but the consequences of exposing Camilla would be enormous for everyone involved. The scandal would rock the monarchy, destroy family relationships, and potentially create a constitutional crisis. But Catherine also knew that allowing Camilla to continue her surveillance activities would be a betrayal of everyone who trusted and loved her. The royal family deserved to know that their privacy had been violated and their trust had been betrayed. The question was how to reveal the truth in a way that would minimize the damage while ensuring that justice was served. Catherine's investigation took a dramatic turn when Detective Inspector Mitchell discovered that Camilla's surveillance operation extended far beyond the royal family. Through careful analysis of financial records and communication patterns, they uncovered evidence that Camilla had been gathering intelligence on prominent politicians, business leaders, and media figures who had connections to the royal family. The scope was breathtaking and terrifying. Camilla had apparently been building a comprehensive database of compromising information about anyone who might influence or threaten her position within the establishment. She had recordings of private conversations between government ministers, financial records of wealthy donors to royal charities, and personal details about journalists who covered royal affairs. Catherine realized that Camilla had essentially created her own version of a state intelligence service, but one that operated without oversight or legal authority. The woman had been positioning herself as one of the most powerful people in Britain through systematic blackmail and manipulation, all while maintaining the facade of being a devoted wife and stepmother. The discovery of Camilla's broader activities explained many things that had previously puzzled Catherine. the unusually positive media coverage Camilla had received in recent years, the support she had gained from politicians who had previously been critical of her, and the way certain scandals involving the royal family had been quickly suppressed or redirected away from her. Detective Inspector Mitchell arranged for Catherine to meet with a trusted contact at MI5, the British Domestic Intelligence Service. The meeting took place at a safe house in central London, and Catherine felt like she was living in a spy novel as she was escorted through multiple security checkpoints to reach the meeting. Location: Agent David Harrison had been with MI5 for over 20 years and specialized in internal security threats. When Catherine presented him with the evidence she had gathered, his expression grew increasingly serious. He confirmed that several of the surveillance techniques Camilla had used were known methods employed by foreign intelligence services, suggesting she might have received professional training or assistance. Agent Harrison explained that if Camilla was indeed conducting unauthorized surveillance on government officials and using the information for personal gain, she could be charged with multiple serious crimes including conspiracy, blackmail, and violations of the Official Secrets Act. The potential sentences were severe, even for someone in her position. More disturbing was Agent Harrison's revelation that MI5 had been aware of unusual intelligence activities around the royal family for several months, but they hadn't been able to identify the source. Camilla's operation had been sophisticated enough to avoid detection by professional counterintelligence officers, which suggested a level of expertise that was deeply concerning. Catherine learned that several foreign intelligence services had been attempting to recruit assets within the British establishment, and Camilla's activities fit the profile of someone who might be working with hostile foreign powers. The possibility that the Queen Consort might be a security threat to the nation added another layer of urgency to the situation. Agent Harrison assured Catherine that MI5 would now launch a formal investigation into Camilla's activities, but he warned that the political implications would be enormous. If their investigation confirmed that Camilla had been compromising national security, it would create a crisis that could threaten the stability of the government and the monarchy. Catherine returned to palace life with the knowledge that she was now part of an active intelligence operation. She had to continue acting normally while helping MI5 gather evidence against Camilla. The psychological pressure was intense, especially when she had to interact with Camilla during family events and act as if nothing had changed. During a weekend gathering at Balmoral, Catherine noticed that Camilla seemed unusually interested in discussions about security arrangements for upcoming state visits. She asked detailed questions about which foreign dignitaries would be attending, what security protocols would be in place, and where private meetings would be held. Catherine discreetly recorded these conversations and passed the information to Agent Harrison. Catherine also observed that Camilla had developed close relationships with several new staff members who had joined the royal household in recent months. These individuals seemed to have access to areas of the palace that were normally restricted, and they often appeared in locations where private family conversations were taking place. William began to notice that Catherine seemed tense and distracted during family gatherings. He mentioned that she seemed to be watching Camilla carefully and asked if there had been some kind of conflict between them. Catherine had to deflect his concerns while feeling guilty about keeping such a massive secret from her husband. The strain of maintaining the deception was affecting Catherine's relationship with her children as well. She found herself being overly protective, worrying constantly about their safety and questioning whether their conversations at home were being monitored. The children began asking why their mother seemed worried all the time. Detective Inspector Mitchell reported that the technical investigation had revealed the full extent of Camilla's surveillance network. There were recording devices in virtually every room used by the royal family, hidden cameras in gardens and private areas, and sophisticated computer systems that were intercepting and storing digital communications. The cost of this operation was estimated to be in the millions of pounds, far more than Camilla could have funded from her personal resources. MI5's financial investigation was tracing money flows that suggested the operation was being funded by sources outside Britain, possibly by foreign governments or criminal organizations. Catherine learned that some of the intelligence Camilla had gathered was already being used against its targets. Several politicians had made policy decisions that seemed to favor Camilla's interests after having private meetings with her. Business leaders had donated large sums to causes she supported following conversations, where she demonstrated knowledge of their personal affairs. The revelation that Camilla was actively using her surveillance intelligence for personal gain transformed the situation from a family scandal into what Agent Harrison described as a national security emergency. The Queen Consort was essentially operating as an uncontrolled intelligence agent within the heart of the British establishment. Catherine was asked to help MI5 gather evidence of Camilla's active use of compromising information. This required her to attend social events where she could observe Camilla's interactions with politicians and business leaders, looking for signs that private information was being used inappropriately. At a charity gala hosted by Charles and Camilla, Catherine watched as Camilla had private conversations with several cabinet ministers. Using listening equipment provided by MI5, Catherine was able to record portions of these conversations where Camilla referenced information that should have been confidential to the ministers. The recordings revealed that Camilla was indeed using surveillance intelligence to influence political decisions. She was subtly threatening to expose embarrassing information while offering to support politicians who cooperated with her requests. The conversations were masterfully manipulative, with Camilla never explicitly stating threats but making her leverage clear. Catherine realized that Camilla had become one of the most dangerous people in Britain, wielding power through fear and manipulation, while hiding behind her royal title. The woman had corrupted the very institution she claimed to serve, turning the monarchy into a base for criminal activities. The evidence Catherine and MI5 had gathered was now substantial enough to support serious criminal charges. But Agent Harrison warned that prosecuting the Queen Consort would create unprecedented constitutional problems. The case would likely require intervention from the highest levels of government and could potentially force King Charles to choose between his wife and his crown. Catherine understood that she had uncovered something that would change British history. The revelation of Camilla's activities would not only destroy her personally but would likely force a fundamental restructuring of how the royal family operated and how the monarchy related to the government and the public. As she prepared for what would inevitably be a confrontation with Camilla, Catherine knew that her life and the lives of everyone she loved were about to change forever. The hidden chamber she had discovered by accident had led to the exposure of what might be the most serious breach of royal security in modern British history. The confrontation came sooner than Catherine had expected. Agent Harrison contacted her with urgent news that MI5's investigation had been discovered. Someone within the intelligence service had leaked information about the investigation to Camilla, and she was now taking steps to destroy evidence and eliminate threats to her operation. Catherine received an emergency call from Detective Inspector Mitchell warning her that Camilla knew about their investigation and was likely planning to take action against Catherine. The detective advised Catherine to immediately move to a secure location with her children while MI5 coordinated with palace security to ensure their safety. But before Catherine could implement these safety measures, she received a text message from Camilla requesting an urgent private meeting. The message was polite but firm, suggesting that they needed to discuss mutual concerns that had recently developed. Catherine knew this was the confrontation she had been dreading, but she also realized it might be her only opportunity to get Camilla to confess her activities on record. Catherine decided to meet with Camilla in the hidden chamber itself, the scene of her original discovery. She notified Agent Harrison of her plan and was fitted with sophisticated recording equipment that would capture everything that happened during their confrontation. MI5 positioned agents throughout the palace to provide backup if the situation became dangerous. Catherine made her way to the East Wing corridor and opened the hidden panel, just as she had weeks earlier when this entire nightmare had begun. But this time she wasn't alone in the chamber. Camilla was already there, sitting calmly at the ornate desk as if she owned the space completely. Camilla looked up as Catherine entered, her expression showing no surprise or concern about being discovered in her secret surveillance center. Instead, she smiled coldly and gestured for Catherine to sit in one of the chairs facing the desk, as if Catherine were reporting to her superior rather than confronting a criminal. The Queen Consort appeared completely composed and in control, which was perhaps the most frightening aspect of the encounter. Catherine had expected anger, denial, or panic, but Camilla's calm confidence suggested that she had been prepared for this confrontation and had plans for dealing with it. Camilla began speaking in a measured tone, acknowledging that Catherine had discovered her private workspace and commending her for the thoroughness of her investigation. She spoke as if Catherine's detective work was impressive rather than threatening, maintaining the tone of someone who remained in complete control of the situation. Catherine tried to demand explanations for the surveillance operation, the recording equipment, and the files containing private information about family members. But Camilla interrupted her calmly, explaining that Catherine was misunderstanding the nature and purpose of her activities. According to Camilla, everything Catherine had discovered was part of a legitimate security operation designed to protect the royal family from external threats. She claimed that the surveillance was necessary to identify potential security breaches, monitor for signs of hostile intelligence activities, and ensure that family members weren't being manipulated by outside forces. Camilla's explanation was delivered with such authority and conviction that Catherine almost began to doubt her own interpretation of what she had found. The older woman was clearly skilled at manipulation and had years of practice at making her actions seem reasonable and justified. But Catherine pressed for details about why the surveillance had been conducted in secret, why family members hadn't been informed about these security measures, and why the recordings included intimate personal conversations that had no security relevance. Camilla's answers became less convincing as Catherine challenged the logic of her explanations. The Queen Consort eventually abandoned her pretense about security operations and shifted to a more threatening approach. She pointed out that Catherine was in a very vulnerable position, having discovered information that could be dangerous to her and her family if it were mishandled or shared inappropriately. Camilla revealed that she knew about Catherine's cooperation with MI5 and her meetings with Agent Harrison. She had detailed information about Catherine's movements over the past several weeks, proving that Catherine herself had been under surveillance during her investigation. The realization that she had been watched while trying to expose Camilla's activities was terrifying. Catherine discovered that Camilla's surveillance network was even more extensive than she had realized. The Queen Consort had sources within MI5 itself, which explained how she had learned about the investigation so quickly. She also had surveillance capabilities that extended beyond the royal family, to include Catherine's personal friends, her family members, and even her children's activities at school. Camilla made it clear that she possessed compromising information about virtually everyone Catherine cared about. She had recordings of private conversations, financial records, personal secrets, and embarrassing details that could be used to destroy reputations and relationships. The implied threat was unmistakable: cooperation or consequences. The Queen Consort outlined her expectations for how Catherine would handle the situation going forward. She wanted Catherine to end her cooperation with MI5, destroy any evidence she had gathered, and convince the intelligence service that their investigation had been based on misunderstandings. In exchange, Camilla would ensure that Catherine's family remained safe and their privacy was protected. Catherine realized that Camilla was essentially demanding that she become complicit in the surveillance operation by helping to cover it up. The Queen Consort wasn't just asking for silence. She was requiring active participation in protecting her criminal activities from exposure. But Catherine also noticed something that gave her hope. Throughout their conversation, Camilla had been confirming details about her surveillance operation, acknowledging the existence of recording equipment, and admitting to activities that constituted serious crimes. Everything was being recorded by Catherine's hidden devices, providing MI5 with the confession they needed to take action. Catherine pretended to consider Camilla's demands, while encouraging her to provide more details about the scope of her surveillance network. She asked questions about how the operation was funded, who else was involved, and what information had been gathered about specific individuals. Camilla, confident in her control of the situation, provided answers that further incriminated her. The Queen Consort revealed that her surveillance operation had been running for over a decade, long before her marriage to Charles. She had begun gathering intelligence about the royal family and related individuals as part of a long-term strategy to secure her position and influence within the British establishment. Camilla also admitted that she had been sharing some of the intelligence she gathered with foreign contacts, though she claimed this was part of legitimate diplomatic activities rather than espionage. Catherine realized that this admission could constitute treason, one of the most serious crimes possible under British law. As their conversation continued, Catherine became increasingly confident that she had gathered enough evidence to expose Camilla's crimes. But the Queen Consort seemed to sense that something had shifted in Catherine's demeanor, and her tone became more explicitly threatening. Camilla stood up from behind the desk and moved closer to Catherine, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper. She described in detail the various ways that Catherine's life could be destroyed if she chose not to cooperate. The threats weren't just about embarrassing revelations. They involved potential physical harm to Catherine and her children. The Queen Consort revealed that her surveillance network included individuals with backgrounds in intelligence services and private security firms. These people had skills that went far beyond recording conversations and taking photographs. Camilla was implying that she had access to resources that could be used to eliminate threats to her operation permanently. Catherine realized that she was in immediate physical danger. Camilla had lured her to this isolated location where no one would think to look for her, and the conversation had moved from blackmail to direct threats of violence. She began looking for ways to exit the chamber, quickly while hoping that MI5's backup teams were close enough to respond if needed. But before Catherine could move toward the passage leading out of the chamber, she heard footsteps approaching from the corridor outside. Multiple people were entering the hidden area, and Catherine feared that Camilla had arranged for her accomplices to join them. The situation was spiraling beyond what she had prepared for. To Catherine's surprise and relief, the footsteps belonged to Agent Harrison and a team of MI5 officers. They had been monitoring Catherine's location and had decided to intervene when the conversation turned violent. The agents quickly secured the chamber and placed Camilla under arrest for multiple serious crimes. Camilla's reaction to being arrested was perhaps the most chilling aspect of the entire encounter. She showed no surprise, no fear, and no remorse. Instead, she looked at Catherine with cold hatred and made it clear that this confrontation was far from over. Even in custody, she radiated a sense of power and control that suggested she had contingency plans for this situation. Agent Harrison explained to Catherine that MI5 had been recording the entire conversation through multiple channels and now had comprehensive evidence of Camilla's criminal activities. The Queen Consort had essentially provided a complete confession while threatening a member of the royal family, giving investigators everything they needed to pursue serious charges. As Camilla was led away by MI5 officers, she turned back to Catherine one final time. Her parting words were a promise that Catherine would regret her decision to expose the surveillance operation. The threat was delivered calmly and quietly, but it carried the weight of someone who still believed she had the power to follow through on her promises. Catherine remained in the hidden chamber after Camilla's arrest, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just happened. She had exposed what was likely the most serious security breach in modern royal history, but she had also made an enemy of one of the most dangerous and well-connected people in Britain. Agent Harrison assured Catherine that MI5 would provide protection for her and her family while the investigation continued. But he also warned that Camilla's surveillance network was extensive and might include individuals who would remain loyal to her even after her arrest. The threat to Catherine's safety was real and would continue until all of Camilla's accomplices were identified and neutralized. The immediate priority was securing all the evidence in the hidden chamber and tracing the full extent of Camilla's surveillance operation. MI5 teams began carefully cataloging the files, recording equipment and computer systems that Camilla had used to spy on the royal family and numerous other targets. Catherine learned that the investigation would now expand to include international intelligence agencies, as Camilla's admitted contacts with foreign entities raised questions about potential espionage activities. The case had grown from a family scandal into a matter of national security that would require coordination between multiple government agencies. As Catherine finally left the hidden chamber for what she hoped would be the last time, she knew that her life would never be the same. She had protected her family and exposed a dangerous criminal, but she had also opened a chapter of royal history that would have consequences for years to come. The hidden chamber had revealed secrets that would shake the monarchy to its foundations and force a reckoning with how much the royal family really knew about the people they trusted, with their most intimate moments. The weeks following Camilla's arrest were unlike anything the royal family had ever experienced. The palace was essentially under siege by investigators, journalists, and security personnel, as the full scope of the surveillance scandal became apparent. Catherine found herself at the center of a storm that threatened to destroy everything the monarchy had worked to build over decades. King Charles was devastated by the revelations about his wife's activities. The man who had waited decades to marry the woman he loved discovered that she had been systematically betraying his family's trust and potentially committing treason. The psychological impact on the king was severe, and palace physicians became concerned about his ability to fulfill his royal duties during the crisis. William struggled to understand how Catherine had uncovered such an extensive conspiracy while keeping it secret from him for weeks. Their marriage, which had always been built on trust and open communication, was strained by the secrets Catherine had been forced to keep. The couple spent hours in difficult conversations as Catherine explained her reasoning for not sharing her discoveries immediately. The children were kept largely unaware of the specific details, but they could sense the tension and stress affecting their parents. Extra security measures were implemented around them, and their normal routines were disrupted as investigators worked to ensure that Camilla's surveillance network posed no ongoing threat to their safety. My5's investigation revealed that Camilla's operation had been even more extensive than initially suspected. She had been blackmailing members of parliament, business leaders, and foreign diplomats using information gathered through her surveillance activities. Several major political decisions over the past few years appeared to have been influenced by her behind-the-scenes manipulation. The international implications were staggering. Foreign intelligence services had been aware of unusual intelligence activities around the British royal family, and some had apparently been receiving information from Camilla's network. The revelation that the Queen Consort had been sharing sensitive information with foreign contacts created a diplomatic crisis that required intervention from the highest levels of government. Catherine was called to testify before a closed session of Parliament about her discoveries and her cooperation with MI5. The experience was intimidating and exhausting, as she was questioned for hours about every detail of her investigation. Politicians from all parties wanted to understand how such a massive security breach had gone undetected for so long. The media coverage was relentless and often hostile toward Catherine. Some outlets suggested that she had acted inappropriately by conducting her own investigation rather than immediately reporting her concerns to proper authorities. Others questioned whether her accusations against Camilla were motivated by personal jealousy or family conflicts rather than genuine security concerns. Catherine received both praise and criticism from the public. Many people admired her courage in exposing Camilla's crimes, while others blamed her for destroying the royal family's stability and reputation. The polarized reactions reflected the complex emotions that people felt about seeing the monarchy embroiled in such a serious scandal. The legal proceedings against Camilla were complicated by her status as Queen Consort and the constitutional questions raised by prosecuting a member of the royal family. Government lawyers spent weeks determining how to proceed with charges that included conspiracy, blackmail, violations of privacy laws, and potential treason. Camilla's defense team argued that her activities had been motivated by legitimate security concerns and that she had been trying to protect the royal family from external threats. They claimed that her surveillance methods were excessive but well-intentioned, and that the charges against her were politically motivated rather than legally justified. But the evidence Catherine and MI5 had gathered was overwhelming. The recordings of Camilla's confession, the extensive documentation of her surveillance activities, and the testimony of accomplices who agreed to cooperate with investigators created an insurmountable case against her. Several palace staff members who had been part of Camilla's surveillance network were also arrested and charged. The investigation revealed that she had been recruiting and paying employees throughout the royal household for years, creating a network of informants who had access to virtually every aspect of the family's private lives. Catherine learned that some of the people she had trusted most had been secretly working for Camilla. Staff members who had been with the family for years, who had been present during the most intimate family moments, had been reporting back to the Queen Consort about everything they observed. The betrayal by trusted employees was almost as devastating as Camilla's surveillance activities themselves. Catherine began to understand why Camilla had been so confident in her abilities to monitor and manipulate the royal family. She had effectively controlled the people who were supposed to be protecting and serving them. The hidden chamber in Buckingham Palace was sealed as evidence, but Catherine knew she would never be able to walk through those corridors again without remembering what she had discovered there. The palace, which had always been her family's sanctuary, now felt contaminated by the knowledge of how extensively their privacy had been violated. Charles was forced to make the most difficult decision of his reign. Despite his personal feelings for Camilla, he could not allow someone who had betrayed the monarchy to remain as queen consort. The marriage was annulled, and Camilla was stripped of all royal titles and privileges. The constitutional crisis created by Camilla's activities forced Parliament to implement new security protocols for the royal family. Independent oversight committees were established to monitor palace security, and regular audits would be conducted to ensure that similar surveillance operations could never be established again. Catherine worked with security experts to develop new procedures for protecting the royal family's privacy while still allowing them to fulfill their public duties. The balance between accessibility and security had to be completely reconsidered in light of how easily Camilla had been able to compromise their private lives. The psychological impact on Catherine was significant. She had nightmares about being watched and recorded, and she struggled with paranoia about who could be trusted. Therapy helped her process the trauma of discovering that her most intimate moments had been monitored and analyzed for years. William and Catherine's marriage eventually recovered from the strain of the secrets and revelations, but it took months of counseling and honest conversation. They had to rebuild trust and establish new patterns of communication that would prevent similar secrets from creating barriers between them in the future. The monarchy survived the scandal, but it was forever changed. The public's perception of the royal family shifted as people realized how vulnerable they were to manipulation and betrayal from within their own circle. The image of the royals as a close-knit family living in secure privacy was shattered by the revelations of Camilla's surveillance operation. Catherine's role in exposing the conspiracy eventually made her a hero to many people who admired her courage and determination. But she never forgot the price of her discovery, or the innocent trust that had been lost when she opened that hidden panel in the palace corridor. Years later, as Catherine reflected on the events that had changed her life and the monarchy forever, she often wondered what would have happened if she had never noticed the architectural inconsistency in that East Wing corridor. The hidden chamber had revealed secrets that needed to be exposed, but it had also opened a door to a darker world that she sometimes wished she had never discovered. The legacy of Camilla's hidden chamber would remain with the royal family for generations, a reminder that even in the most secure and trusted environments, vigilance was necessary to protect against those who would abuse their positions for personal gain. Catherine had learned that sometimes the greatest threats come not from outside enemies, but from those who are welcomed into the family and given access to its most precious secrets.